Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. We've got a really exciting one to its author. Ryan Pitterson is with us to talk about his book, Judgment of the Nephilim. And we're just going to start off the show. We'll have a good laugh when he comes on here. I ordered this book, and so we were talking to him. I was just excited. I'm like, dude, it's an amazing study guide. And he's like, study guide. And he's like, did you get the book? I'm like, no. I bought just the study guide. So I actually, basically, like an absolute nerd, I went to the test first. I didn't actually study the material, so I challenged the course. So this is going to be kind of interesting. So yeah. So anyway, we're talking about his book, Judgment of the Nephilim. So, but just a little bit of thing. The Nephilim, they are giants of mention in the Bible. It's starts in the book of Genesis. They're the offspring of angels and human women. It's the start off point to where pretty much the Christian story begins, because it's the one that predicts the Messiah, that predicts, and this goes through some of this challenge. And this is one of the books that, whether you're a devout Christian, whether you're just a casual believer, you're just interested in the subject, this book alone encompasses so many different aspects. And so this one's always been one from the creation story all the way up to the flood. This is Moses. This is the one book that always has a lot of stuff, and there's that tiny little couple of verses where all of a sudden you hear about this Nephilim, and then it's just kind of like tails away. So it's really awesome when we have authors like Ryan Pitterson to come on and actually talk about these subjects and bring more information on something that a lot of people may not have a lot of idea what's going on. So let's get right to it. Ryan Pitterson, we're going to talk about Nephilim and Judgment of the Nephilim, and that is right now.
Welcome to the Three Beards podcast. My name is Craig, along with Austin and Chris.
Passed to a new generation of Americans born in this century.
Let me out.
I'm afraid that is white.
Justice and honor in Massachusetts colony?
All right. There's people at Facebook that don't want us talking about this because we didn't go live on Facebook, but we are now. All right. So at this time, let's bring on Chris. He's back. How are you, sir?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you all doing tonight?
And he's very silent.
I'm doing.
Hey, there
right.
he is.
How you doing?
All right,
tonight?
he's on delay. Good. Let's not keep him waiting in the green room too much. That'd make us sound special, like we got a green room. Ryan Pitterson, how are you, sir?
Craig, Chris, I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. And by the way, I love the intro to the show.
Oh, thank you very much.
The whole thing is really good. I'm even more excited to be on it. It's like, got me such walk room music.
We appreciate that, and like self-deprecating humor here. Instead of talking about, yes, as you can see, I purchased the study guide and not the actual book. So that's what. So people didn't see it before. As I was talking with him, I'm like, I bought this, but it wasn't really what I was expecting. I wasn't expecting this right off the bat. Boom, homework. What do you think is this talking about? And I'm like, all right, I'm into this. This is just right now. We're just going. I'm like, I was expecting more just information first, and then let me process it. Then we'll go to the quiz. And it's like, whoa, But no, I was a moron, and I ordered the study guide first. So, but yeah, so
I want everyone just working. I'm just making everyone work. You figure out what the Nephilim are. You figure it out.
That's right.
Yeah, no. It's all good. I did make companion study guides for both my books, and I will happily send you guys the books so you have them and the documentaries and everything. I share. The thing is, I give away stuff every week. So I actually do on my weekly show. I give prizes every week. So I like to be a blessing to those I interact with. So I'll happily send you the actual copy of Judgment of the Nephilim.
We would love that. Yeah, both of us would love to have that. So yeah, So after the show, we'll get you that information.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I've got it right up here on the screen for the visual people to see. You can go to Amazon.com. You can click the follow this author like we already did down here. He's already being followed by us, and you can purchase if you actually click the right one. This one where it says just avoid the one that says study guide first until you've read this one, and then you can switch to the thing. And then after you've done this, and if you've done your homework after the study guide, then you can follow it up with his latest one, the final Nephilim.
Yes,
which he just came out with, and I think there's a study guide for that one, correct?
Yes, there is.
Okay, yep, there it is right there. I'll make sure I don't click. So don't do I did. Click the one on the left first, and then the one on the right. Yeah, yeah. So we'll get right to that. So but check him out. You can find more information on Ryan Pitterson too. You can go and I've got on this thing. It's judgmentofthenephilim.com. It's also social media across the board. Just if you type in Judgment of the Nephilim, you're going to find him. And you're getting information. And plug your show while we got people in the beginning where they can watch it.
My YouTube channel, which is Judgment of the Nephilim, this is my YouTube channel. I do a show Thursday Night Theology, where I actually take questions. I get lots of questions from readers, subscribers about anything supernatural in Scripture. Anything. It doesn't have to be about the Nephilim. It can be about fallen angels, the Bible, Satan, hell, the rapture, UFOs. Where do they fit in? Everything under the sun. And I just try to apply my research. I take about 2 or 3 questions each week and answer them live on a live show. Again, obviously on Thursday nights on my YouTube. Also, you can find also my Facebook channel. But YouTube is the main outlet for that.
Nice. Right. Yeah, but I mean, let's get right into it. I mean, it's how we start out is the Nephilim, like I did in the beginning. A lot of places, and do you want to start off by for the people that aren't really familiar? Do you want to start off by explaining the Nephilim to them, or do you want to come back to that on a later point? It doesn't matter to me.
Oh, we can just explain it from the jump.
Okay, yeah, go for that. For you, like, explain to somebody like in a quick, just a bridge thing. It's like, what are the Nephilim?
Yeah, so they were critical figures in the ancient times of the Bible. A Nephilim is a hybrid, half fallen angel, half human hybrid. And long story short, there was a rebellion in the book of Genesis where a small group of fallen angels took human women as wives, had babies with them, and they were the Nephilim giants. And they basically were overrunning the world with violence, corrupting human genetics, and they were the reason for the flood. We all know the story of Noah's Ark. It wasn't just a story of people behaving badly. It was about a genetic war taking place and God rescuing humanity from the Nephilim giants.
And so just kind of jump off of that too. One of the things that I had a question about, because I'm trying to get the actual I want to get the verse here. I want to say it was Genesis 6:4 is where they talk about the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, for sure, and also afterward. So that was one of the things too. So if the flood Noah was to wipe out this evil, this was not supposed to be here, this creation of the Nephilim. So one of those, I mean, the real sarcastic jerk would be like, he failed. It's just, but it's one of those, because obviously it's not like it wiped out, but it was one of those. So what then, like, my question for it was, okay, so the flood's purpose was to wipe it out. So either this still occurred and it's just one of those. So why wasn't there like a secondary attempt at wiping these out? Why was this the ones afterward just allowed to go? Because I know the rumor, we're getting long-winded here for this question, but like David was in Goliath, the story. Goliath was, for all in purposes, most likely Nephilim.
Yes.
The holdover. So in these things, so why were they allowed to exist and not be cleansed again, but the other ones were?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first of all, I think that the Nephilim DNA made it through on the ark through one of the wives of Noah's sons. So I think that's how it made it. So I don't think there was a second group of angels fornicating. I don't think that ever happened again. But there were definitely giants, Nephilim giants after flood. Goliath, the most famous Nephilim in the Bible, definitely being a prime example. And my answer to your question, though, is that God did impose a severe punishment on them, because this is what the key of understanding why Nephilim is important as a Christian, as a believer, to understand the Bible today, is that it answers two of the biggest questions. Why would God send a global flood to wipe out 99% of the human population? Mm-hmm. And when you get to the book of Joshua, all of a sudden, God is telling the Israelites, go into this country, into this land, and there are 7 nations. When you see them, wipe them out. Kill everybody, the women, the children, everyone. Kill the animals they have. Why? And you don't see that in later books in the Bible, but there was a specific time when God said, utterly exterminate these people. And it's a good question, because it's like, why is God advocating genocide? Because those 7 nations were the nations that were the descendants of the post-Diluvian giants. That's where the post-Diluvian giants were found. And what you see in the book of Joshua, it tells you that the last remnants of them, after Joshua goes through with the armies of Israel and God fighting himself, God himself came down and fought against those giants. It says the last remnants of them went to Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod, where they hid out. Where was Goliath from? Gath. So now you go generations later, you get to David, the last remaining giants. Goliath was one of the last 6 giants that Nephilim that are mentioned in Scripture. And his mighty men, there were David's mighty men in the Bible, who kind of like his Black Ops, Navy SEALs, his elite soldiers. It's in the book of 2 Chronicles. You see the list of the final Nephilim that are mentioned in the Old Testament, and David's mighty men killed them all. The last 5 of them.
Yeah, I was wondering, because you've heard the story of the Kandahar giant, haven't you?
Yeah, of course.
So that there's rumor that that is one of the holdovers too. That's the red-haired giants of folklore in the native Indian nation tribes. In the U.S., they all talked about cannibalistic red-haired giants that lived here, that they would fight. And so I was wondering, it's because that was one of the questions, like when through here, it wasn't mentioned in the study guide. So I was not allowed to fight about this stuff, but it was one of the I was curious, like if you touched on that, like if you feel like even like modern time, is there still potentially like a holdover somewhere, or are you in the impression that for the most part, like you just said with David and his mighty men, that these were in fact wiped out, and then
I think they were wiped out in David's day. I think what we see today is how it manifests is in 2 ways. And the Nephilim, when they were killed, when a Nephilim is killed, their spirits are the demons in the Bible. Like a lot of times we think of demons and fallen angels as being interchangeable. They're not. They're totally different beings. And so the demons that we see running around, especially in the New Testament, are the spirits of the dead Nephilim. And so I think in modern time, when we see things like when people talk about, like, for example, the UFO alien phenomena, when they're having abduction stories and accounts of creatures like Bigfoot or the Kandahar giant, I think that's a spirit realm manifestation. I don't think that. So what I'm saying is, I think the people are experiencing something. They are literally seeing something, but it's a spirit realm type of interaction, and that's how the Nephilim are interacting today, in that fashion, as opposed to giants literally like they were in antiquity in the Old Testament.
Now, because obviously people, anybody that's a visual type thinking, you're thinking this giant and fallen angel and a human woman, just in having relations, to have this offspring, they're like, okay, how does this work? I've also seen reports where basically they show up like normal, like the angels presented themselves like just normal, human sized, and that's how this thing it was. And I think more people are caught up on it was the genetics that was involved, and so the offspring, grew more, but it wasn't so much that you had this massive 20-30 foot tall, giant that was trying to copulate with a human female.
Exactly, right? And we see this throughout the Bible. Angels are called men. They're called like, so they're as a reference point, so they can appear like a human being, a normal sized human. In fact, in the book of Hebrews, it says that we might entertain an angel and don't even realize it. It says, be kind to strangers, because you might meet an angel and not even realize it's an angel. So they certainly can take on a fully human looking appearance. I think that's how the relations happens.
Yeah, and that for me, that was some of the questions just like I had. And then I know one of the ones, I mean, this is a little bit, I think you might have talked about in your book. Like I said, I apologize when I have to keep, referencing it that way. But for me, like one of the things, like one of the why questions I had, especially going to church and stuff, was Cain and Abel. You have Abel's killed. Cain is sent out of the garden. So what they talk about is, he populates and, his lineage starts to grow. Where did those other people come from?
Yeah,
great question. Yeah, and and that's one of the. So
he got married.
That's the thing. So they talk about Adam and Eve were the beginning. Well, there seems to be a problem with the timeline at that point. There seems to be something else, and that's where I was wondering: is that either another race that's there? Is that the Nephilim themselves that he ends up basically genetically intermixing with this angelic race that's over there? So that was one of the questions. Like it maybe, I don't know. Do you address that in this book?
I do actually. See? You're on to something. So let me just show you.
I did my home. I did my study.
We're about. Yeah. That study guide's working for you, my brother.
It is.
So we're about 50% apart, right? So here's the thing. So Cain and Abel. So first off, in terms of just think about it this way. The important thing about the Garden of Eden, I start off with Genesis 3 in the Garden of Eden in the beginning of Judgment of Nephilim, because it's so important to understand how the Bible's history from the fallen angelic perspective. So in the garden, God told the devil in Genesis 3, verse 15, exactly how he was going to be defeated. So this was critical information, right, from the angelic satanic side. Mm-hmm. He said it's going to be the seed of the woman. A child is going to be born, a human child. It's not going to be God throwing lightning down. It's not going to be a legion of angels coming to wrestle him and take him to hell or anything like that. A human, clearly having supernatural powers, who would defeat him. So this set the course of history, because now the devil had a target. If I can stop this Messiah from being born, kill him if he is born, or corrupt him, I can stop this plan that God has to defeat me. Why does it matter? Okay. How does it relate to Cain and Abel? Cain could have been the Messiah for all intents and purposes. He was the firstborn son of Adam and Eve. He literally could have been the Messiah from the devil and the fallen angelic perspective. He gets corrupted, kills his brother. God then banishes him from Eden altogether. Now, I believe where his wife came from, I believe his wife was just one of his cousins. We don't know. So we're not told the time frame, how old they were when Cain killed Abel. We don't know how many children were born. We're just, the first time we get any time reference is when the third son was born, Seth, when Adam was 130. So we don't know in the intervening time, and we just told Adam had many sons and daughters. He lived to be 930 years old. So I believe they were marrying cousins, frankly. But where you and I do converge is that I think that in the lineage of Cain, when it goes through his genealogy and you get to the 7th generation, you see the reference to Lamech, his descendant Lamech. And that is I call Lamech's family, his nuclear family, I call them the first family of the Nephilim. Because you get this description where you see, rather than it just saying one father, one son, then the next son, and the next son through generations, it talks about his whole family and gives lots of detail. And what you see there is his family has this technological explosion. He has 3 sons. Jabal, Jubal, Tubal-Cain. Jabal was the father of animal husbandry, raising animals, tent making. Jubal is the literal inventor of music. He invented musical instruments. He is credited for that in the Bible. In fact, the term Jubilee in the Bible, which is a celebration where you blow trumpets, comes from his name. And then you have Tubal-Cain, who was the first blacksmith. He invented metallurgy, blacksmithing, forging weapons and tools. And then it says, and the sister of Tubal-Cain was Naamah. And so I believe that's the family that made the first transaction with the fallen angels, to give a woman's hand in marriage for knowledge, for the secret nod from the angels, which, so I believe wasn't Cain, I believe was his descendants. And even when you look in apocryphal books like the book of Enoch, that's exactly what it says, that this was an exchange of angels giving hidden knowledge to humanity in exchange for a woman's hand in marriage, essentially.
Okay, yeah, and I definitely could see that, because that makes that makes a lot of sense too. Just because there's always been that talk. It's like there was more children than just were described.
Exactly. And a lot of them. In fact, when you look at Lamech, he was the first polygamist mentioned in the Bible. He had 2 wives, Ada and Zillah. So there's definitely women around, because he married 2 of them. So, and in fact, to show you how infamous this family is, when you go from Adam's creation to the flood, it's roughly 1,656 years in the biblical chronology, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are only 4 women mentioned by name in that whole time period in the Bible. Eve and the 3 women from that one family, that one nuclear family, Ada, Zillah, and the sister Tubal-Cain. I believe the sister Naamah, whose name in Hebrew means beauty, I believe she was the first bride of a fallen angel and the first mother of a Nephilim.
Oh wow, yeah, it was. I teased a little bit prior to the show, told you like where I was kind of going, and here's where I'm going to start with. It's like, why is this so, quickly glossed over? I mean, it just seems, you have like 1 or 2 verses, but this seems to be, such a pivotal part of the setup for the Messiah, for the stuff like this, and it seems like this is such a thing that's just quickly like, oh yeah, and there's a race of giants, and we're on to Moses. It's just like, it's like, okay, and turn the page. It's like I think I'm missing a page.
So throughout your research, I was just wondering. I remember reading somewhere. I don't know if I'm correct or not. Adam was some. They said that the bloodline was some of Adam's bloodline in the Nephilims, or is that true?
Well, yeah. I mean, Adam is the father. Yeah, he would have to be, right, because he's the first human born. So any human is going to have some of Adam's genetics, right? So to some extent, right? So the Y chromosome till today can be traced back through males for thousands of years. So in that sense, but it was right. So you have, but I believe the start of it, and Cain was Adam's son. So I believe it came through his lineage, but it was just a lineage that was not interested in worshiping God. They were just they were just an unbelieving lineage, but they were Adam's descendants nevertheless.
Yeah, because it was. I mean, it makes sense that you'd be able to trace it back there too, and that was just some of the ones. I mean, do you believe that this had, obviously from what I've read through this part and looking at it, looks like you're really going from the angelic, demonic side of it, because I know the other part is, you have the word the Anunnaki. This is tied in with the Nephilim. That this was, because one of the theories, and I'm not sure if you tackled this one or not, that the Ark story is more technological, like it's an actual genetic depository, as opposed to a physical human being, gathering 2 giraffes, 2 rhinos, 2 elephants, and bringing them onto the Ark. That it was literally a DNA collection, and they went through and they grabbed this stuff. So do you address that at all in the book, or do you stick more towards the biblical side?
I do to some extent, right? I don't get into the Anunnaki in specific terms. I'm very familiar with it, but what I talk about is that this is the origin story of a great deal of ancient mythology. It goes back to this story, right? So I talk about when you think about Hercules, right? Achilles, all the, the Greek mythology. You have the gods and you have the demigods. They are the offspring of a god and a human woman. I talk about Plato's Atlantis, and I contrast it with the details about the Nephilim from scripture, and it's very similar. You have a god who falls in love with a human woman, Poseidon, and creates a city for her and for his sons, his hybrid offspring, right? Atlantis. And what do they have in Atlantis? Well, it's the first thing you find out is they have valuable minerals and jewels. In the garden, when you see the description of the Garden of Eden, it tells you that it has bdellium, gold, onyx, and precious jewels. They have every type of animal in Atlantis. And this is coming right from Plato's account in Critias, right? So we're going back to, 300, 200 BC. Mm-hmm. And what do we see in the Garden of Eden? We see animals, right? Every type of animal there. And of course, ultimately, in Plato's account, more gods started fornicating with human women, and that led to more sin and more greed, and Atlantis is destroyed by a flood. So again, it's like, the amount of parallels are pretty staggering. And in fact, I even show, there's I quote lots of, you'll see when you get my book that I quote lots of.
I'm looking forward to it now.
17th, 18th, and 19th century scholars. And so I have a sketch, an illustration from the 1800s of a book about Plato. So it's not a biblical book, but it's a sketch of Atlantis based on Plato's description. And I put that next to an image of a monolith that exists right now in Israel, called Gilgal Rephaim, or the Wheel of the Giants, where it's 40, about 480 tons of basalt stones in 5 concentric circles with a temple in the middle. And this is older than Stonehenge. It's a massive, massive megalith. And it looks almost exactly the same to this sketch of Plato's Atlantis in terms of the exact shape of it. So this is where much of mythology comes from. So when you see things like the Anunnaki, or there you go. There's excellent.
There's some Googling skills right there, folks.
So in the Golan Heights in Israel, they also call it the Wheel of the Giants. And so a lot of the mythology is based on this account, right? And so much of this deals with, even if you go back to modern day mythology, the Da Vinci Code, right? The Secret, this idea of as above, so below. The idea of a god coming down to earth and mating with a human woman. This all goes back to Genesis 6. This is the origin story for many ancient mythologies. Because again, you look at when Moses lived, you're talking 1500 BC. It's 1200 years before Plato, 1200 years before Hesiod and the Greek, and all the great Greek poets wrote mythology. So where's it going way back? It's predating a lot of ancient mythology as we know it.
Yeah, because that's what there's several locations around the world that have this same setup, and so it's one of those things that I've wondered, just through like your books is through a few other ones, where if this doesn't have more of a religious and more of thing to it as opposed to like practical. Because it's like you said, it dates and it's almost identical,
exactly,
in the design. And so I've often wondered what the purpose of the rings, where you see those ones like for Atlantis, it's like, I mean, I guess in a way water breaks, you don't have to worry about waves as much crashing into the center, but it's besides that practical. It's one of those I've often wondered if there was some, how I'm trying, the term for it is killing me. It's I want to say it's Buddhist. It's where you walk through like the gardens and stuff, and you have those meditation paths.
Sure.
And so I've often wondered if this has something around that part, and that's why these things were designed this way.
I would agree 100%. I think there's a complete spiritual power that you're tapping into with the way it's arranged, and many of these structures align with the sun or certain stars at certain times of the year. So I agree completely.
And then now, we've got the copulation, we've got the wrath going on. So in general, how long are we talking from the time when, are we talking about from the time when from Garden of Eden has pretty much paradise has come to end? Are we talking from there up to, I think you said Noah. So I mean, how many years are we talking that this civilization is basically growing, during this time? I mean, we're talking at least probably what, 500-600 years, aren't we?
Exactly. That's exactly what I think it is. Yeah. So, and I trace it back to about 500 to 600 years before the flood. And, again, the apocryphal books will say in the days of Jared, which again, one of the patriarchs, descendant of Adam, to about that time period. And really, if you think about it, I believe that era, that was Atlantis. That was when you had what I call the veil. The veil was removed. You had angels openly interacting with human beings. You had marriages. You had offspring. You had Nephilim giants walking around, and you had, I'm sure, this hidden knowledge, angelic knowledge, being shared all over the world. So I believe that era was Atlantis. And then, by the time you see Noah show up in Genesis 6 and God speaking to him, this has overrun the world. God says to Noah, all flesh has corrupted itself. 3 times he says that. So it's like, we're generations into this basically genetic programming taking place all over the earth.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw the comment right there. It's like, what if Eden was Atlantis?
Oh,
and that's why, I'm like, that's definitely, it's one of those things that maybe that's why we can't ever find it, is because it literally is gone. Yeah, it's it's just one of those.
I like that. I like that. I have one thing to that. Great question, April. So I have a whole chapter in the titular chapter of the book that I can't wait to send you guys. The Judgment of the Nephilim chapter, chapter 11 in the book. I talk about, there's a chapter in the Bible, in the book of Ezekiel, that really deals with all of this. But just to be as frank and blunt as possible, no one ever talks about it. There's very little commentary on it. You won't find. So I basically explain how Ezekiel chapter 31 talks not only about this era, it talks about the leader of the fallen angels, who's called the Assyrian in the Bible. And it goes through, and in fact, that chapter mentions the Garden of Eden more than any other chapter in the Bible. And so basically, so I think the implication is that the fallen angels did overtake Eden, because it actually references this angel going into Eden with other angels. And so I think April's really onto something, that maybe Eden was Atlantis.
And then, Chris, real quick, like Laura just brought, it's like, there's the talk, like it's possibly like Bermuda Triangle too. Well, one of those things that's been the biggest thing is like the flood, especially if you go off the biblical account. If you follow like how, if this did in fact flood the entire earth, I mean, going through, this would have had a geological, effects to where plate tectonics would have been massively altered. I mean, you would have had, where you could have had stuff move like, pretty much overnight. It had some major movements. And so you could end up with something that was, in fact, on the one side of the Atlantic could end up being on the other side of the Atlantic, pretty easy through, because from all indications, the destruction of Atlantis was a cataclysmic, event. I mean, so the flood, I mean, so this would have been an Armageddon type event, as was described with the destruction of Atlantis.
Exactly.
And wouldn't that kind of coming off of hers and April's thing too, that might have fit in with God's judgment against, the fallen angels also being in Eden, that was part of the flood, that it was just, there was a destruction. Boom, it's gone.
Precisely. Yeah, precisely. Yeah, I agree.
And so, yeah, Kristen, what was your question? You're muted. There you go.
Do you still think there's some offsprings of Nephilim still roaming the earth today?
I don't think that they're truly in bodily form. I think they can present themselves that way. I think that, I think it's the demons, right? I think it's the demonological phenomenon, right? Like John Keel, one of the greatest ufologists of all time, right? He's the basis for Fox Mulder and the X-Files. After 40 years of research, his conclusion was the same. He said that the alien phenomenon is really a spiritual interdimensional one. It's not carbon-based life. It's really a spirit type manifestation. He didn't say that he wasn't saying this to make a biblical argument. I don't even know if he's a Christian, but he's just saying he thinks they're more spirit than physical. And that's what I think. I think so. I think when they present, they can masquerade. And remember, in the Gospels, demons want bodies, so they want to possess people. Jesus says that your body is like a house to a demon. You could have 7 demons inside of you. You could have 1,000 demons inside of you. So can they somehow manifest and present themselves and masquerade as a Nephilim or as an alien, a gray or something like that? I do believe they can do that, but I don't think the actual Nephilim, like we saw in the Old Testament, I don't think they're running around today. I think in the end times they'll come back, but right now we're in an intermission essentially.
All right, yeah, because there's one of those. I mean, I wish I had the book. As I said, just so I could reference some of the ones out of the book. This drives me crazy. This drives me crazy that I made this screw up. But yeah, it's because this is one of the things, like too, because I through some of the other stuff, it's like I'm bleeding into the Anunnaki side of it comes into, and that's one of the things for me. It's like the genetic, because one of the thoughts is the Rh negative blood, has a tie back to to this, because I know like it was one of those things that it just, genetically wise, it was an appearance that just there's not really a really good that I can remember. I mean, I could be wrong, but it just kind of showed up. Like all of a sudden you just had this diversion of blood, and they're wondering where this came from, how this appeared.
Yeah. So yeah, no, I mean, that is, if I had to pick a top 5 of questions that I get from people, Rh negative gets brought up a lot. And for me, I try to give people comfort, because I have people who actually say, I have Rh negative blood. I'm so worried. I'm scared. I've had people in person say that to me at conferences. And so I just try to say, listen, if you go by the biblical account, I don't see that being an issue in the New Testament. The giants aren't even mentioned until you get to Revelation. Again, I don't think that someone has to be worried about their genetics, or if they can ever be saved, or if God loves them in modern times.
Yeah,
So
we had a question. Do you think the people who are mediums and psychics are descendants of the Nephilims?
No, I think might be speaking to them though, right? So like in the scriptures, right, you have this thing called an ob in Hebrew, or familiar spirit, right? So it's what is it? It's a spirit that follows people around, like a PI, right? A private investigator, and gets facts on them. And so I can speak to that spirit, commune with them, and tell them things about, your family, what you did, what you ate for dinner last night, things like that. And so it gives me that intelligence on someone else to share, because it's familiar with that person. So I think that's how that phenomenon works, rather than that person themselves being genetically Nephilim. And you think about it too, I mean, in so many cultures, I study lots of cultures. I mean, I'm a Christian. I love the Bible. I absolutely love studying theology, but I study lots of different cultures. And if you think about it, at every turn, you're basically going to find, it's basically the same template. Any person who's giving psychic knowledge, who's sharing supernatural intelligence, they are communing with the spirit realm. You're going to find that whether you're looking in Peruvian shamans, whether you're going to the Caribbean and Obia, it's very similar in cultures. At some level, there are different names, there are different rituals, but you have to commune at some level with the spirit realm to have that intelligence to now share it with somebody, whether you're a shaman, whether you're a wise man, whether you are an Obia doctor in Jamaica or Haiti, whatever it is. It's usually you need a spirit to do that. And the Bible says the same thing.
So with all that said, I'm going to put you on the spot just a little bit. I normally don't do that. So do you think shamans and prophets run hand in hand? Are they talking to the bad deity versus prophets talking to the good side of getting their knowledge directly from God? So where do you coincide that with?
So that's a great question. I'm glad you said that, because it's important to know that in the Bible is very clear, even though many Christians might not even acknowledge this. They might think what I'm saying is crazy. But the Bible is clear that there are lesser gods. There are lower G gods. It's not just one God in heaven. There are lots of gods running around in the Bible on earth that people are communing with. And then there's Yahweh, the creator God, the God of, and he calls himself the God of gods, saying, I'm above all of them, El Elyon, the Most High. And so I think that you can only get this knowledge from two sources, either from God or from everyone who's on the other side. So yes, I do think that if you're not going through Yahweh, you have to be going through one of the lesser gods. I don't believe that God's angels, right? We know in the Bible that the split is 2/3, 1/3. 1/3 of the angels rebelled with the devil, the 2/3 remain with God. I think the 2/3 of righteous angels, I don't think they're trying to speak to psychics or mediums or anything like that. But I do think that the other side is, and that's so yes, they're getting their information from different sources. The prophets are hearing from the God of gods, Yahweh, whereas, and we see this, right? We see in the book of Acts, there's a woman who's speaking, and she's a soothsayer, she's a fortune teller, and the Apostle Paul casts a demon out of her. She can't tell fortunes anymore, and her handlers want to kill him, literally, because he cut off the money. So that's what I think it is. So that's my answer. It's coming from, they're taking it from two different sources.
That was a great answer. That's one of the best. That's one of the best answers I heard. You didn't freeze up and quiver. You gave me an answer.
I'm ready. I'm built for that.
Right. Well, because in a way, it's kind of piggyback, because it's one of the things, like, I've asked several people, and I even have this discussion with people, to where I believe, because you'll have some of the devout that they're like, absolutely, there's only one. There is just one. And I'm like, but even in the Bible, it says, thou shalt not place any other gods before me. It doesn't say there are no other gods. I am the only one. Because one of the biggest things for me, from the stuff I've read from you, in this and stuff, I believe that you look at the Bible, as the literal, that these are the literal words. And that's one of the biggest things I have with a lot of people, like in, church and stuff, is I have that discussion with them, and they're like, well, you got to understand, there's nuances. I'm like, no. It's either literal or it's not. There's not chapter, it's like Genesis 3 is dead on. This is the literal thing. But then you get to Ezekiel, you're like, oh no. See, they were talking about a multitude of things. I'm like, you can't have both. It's either all or no. I'm like, so where is your take on that? When people say, like, well, that wasn't what they literally meant. It's like, so how do you address people in that type of thing when they say, well, I don't think that they meant this literally?
Yeah, you can't have it both ways. I agree with you 100%, right? And also, there's no part, right? There are certain things you can look in the Bible. I think when the Bible's making a metaphor, it's obvious. Jesus says, I am the bread of life, right? Behold, the Lamb of God. John the Baptist is pointing at Jesus. So he's making a metaphor. He's comparing him to a sacrificial lamb. So there are obviously times but I think the Bible's very clear when that's a metaphor. But when Ezekiel sees, what for all intents and purposes sounds like a UFO, wheels within wheels, and floating above his head in all different colors and shining in different colors like jewels, you can't just say, oh, he just, that's just a metaphor for him dreaming of something or what he wants to do with his life. No, it's what he saw. And the Bible doesn't mince words, right? It's saying these things as a historical account. And so I think the challenge for Christians now, and the real reason why a lot of this happens is because so much of the church today, and this is something in the last 100 years, has moved so far away from the supernatural in the Bible, and it's become much more, it treats the Bible much more like a practical book about self-help, how to help your family, how to help your marriage, 5 steps to living a better life, and all those things, and leaves a lot of the supernatural aspects, on the cutting room floor. And that makes it harder to get into scripture, because you're not going to hear, most churches are never going to preach a sermon about the Nephilim, even though, as you already said, this is one of the most important accounts in the entire Bible, right? And it helps to explain what is going on with the flood, right? It helps God make sense, and most churches will never touch this stuff. So that's why I think it's hard for a lot of Christians to really deal with the text, because they're not getting into it on a significant level.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I mean, even in Genesis, they even make reference to satyrs. They make reference to to which, when people look at it, it's like, I mean, for anybody that doesn't know, it's half goat, half man. For anybody that doesn't know what to say, and so these things.
Yes.
And so I've often when I've had Wallace Wagner, when we've had all different people on the show, it's one of the biggest things I have is why is that not, that can't happen, but they fully believe that Jesus raised somebody from the dead.
Right.
He turned water into wine. He did all, cured blindness, cures leprosy. He has all the supernatural ability, these miracles. They say, this is, oh man, these things happen. Okay, but there was a saying, oh, no, that didn't occur.
Yeah, and you identified one of my main motives in writing this book, because when I really stumbled upon Genesis 6 and the Nephilim, which was all my own research. I've been going to church since birth. I was raised in a Christian home, and I never heard of the Nephilim until I was in my early 20s. And so once I started going down the rabbit hole and watching videos and reading L.M. Marzulli and just going to everything I could find, and was really blown away, what I do, I go to church and tell people, do you know about this? Do you know about the Nephilim? Do you know about, and either people said they never heard of it, or they know about it, but it's they don't like to touch it because it gets into the Sumerian texts and other books that aren't the Bible. It's not really in the Bible. So I wanted to show beyond a shadow of a doubt that this is absolutely in the Bible. And not only is it in the Bible, it's actually the war that's taking place all throughout the Old Testament into Revelation, that this is actually weaving its way all through Scripture. It's not just in one chapter. It's actually a huge part of what the devil was trying to do to stop the birth of the Messiah. So that's one of my main motivations, was for the church to try and wake up people up. And also not just wake people up, but also to make them comfortable. That you can learn about giants or satyrs and even look at the details, right, of Scripture, where God tells Noah, bring animals on the ark after their kind. So he's telling them, this is a genetic reference. He's like, I want the animals that I created. I don't want the half horse, half man. I don't want the half goat, half man hybrid that's been running around the earth for the last 600 years. Just bring the ones that I created onto the ark and leave the rest. So I think even the animals themselves were hybridized as well.
Yeah, well, you kind of touched on that, that part too, because it's one, because that was all one, why did that, was it through the flood? I mean, is that why those ceased to exist? I mean, those are wiped out, because it's one of those, I've always wondered if that was the same, like a product of it, that there was, the Nephilim. So they were kind of Dr. Moreau of the biblical, age, they're just creating all these hybrids, just like, I wonder what happens if we put this monkey and this frog in the same, same room for a little while, we'll see what comes out. And all of a sudden you got a monkey that's ribbiting, it's just, yeah, it's, you never know. That was, for anybody, that was a beer fest reference, when he made monkey frogs, so that's a cultural reference there. Yeah. But yeah, it's one of the things for me, and it was kind of addressed, I think, I want to say it was in book of Jude, where they talk about the bound with everlasting chains.
Yes.
And so I'm going to assume you cover this in the book that's on its way to me that I will be reading soon. That's why you believe that it kind of stopped, is that this was such a deterrent that this prevented, because that was one of the questions I had through my study guiding here was that why did it stop? Because you think at some point, if they found human females such a desire and such, lusting after this, you would think that at some point that this would occur again, that wouldn't have stopped.
Yeah, the judgment was really unprecedented, right? Is that if we think about this, right? The devil is still free to do what he wants, to go wherever he wants to go, right? He's all over the earth. He goes to heaven. In the book of Job, twice we see the devil's talking to God in front of his throne, standing with other angels. And God says, where have you coming from? He said, traveling all over the earth. So he still can travel back to heaven, back to earth freely. But the Genesis 6 angels, those rebels who had relations with human women and fathered the Nephilim, they were judged immediately. The flood took them down to the abyss, the bottomless pit, the supernatural prison, and they were chained in darkness, and they've been there for millennia. So I think the deterrent factor of that was so strong that you're taken off the board completely. That's why the angels never attempted it again. And I show that that's actually said in Scripture. Again, I talk about Ezekiel 31, which talks about, I think, this age of Atlantis, the days of Noah, the same thing, and says it was done to the point that no one would ever try this again. So I think that the deterrent factor was the key thing for that punishment that we see in Jude.
So okay, so yeah, that that was one of the questions that I had really for me prepped, is just one of those, because that it seems like that's something that would have come back at this point, because if there's one thing we know, if there's a ability to do something wrong, there's going to be somebody that's going to do it.
Sure.
That's just a natural order. It's just But one of the other things I had is, do you feel through your research that have you kind of with the Antichrist, this is one of the things that came in here. This is the one. It's really kind of a fiery topic. It's like I brought this up to a couple people before. Has anybody ever considered the fact that the current thing that we may be that prophecy of the Antichrist? Because as I was going through, I always wondered, like when it's like, what if I am currently believing in what is considered the Great Deception? Following the Messiah, that you're not, that is the deceiver. And because I've always wondered that, it's like, have you found anything that would lead to where something in the religious movements of today could possibly be that? Or do you think that the Antichrist still has not really come forth, that would be the seed of the devil?
Yeah, I don't think he's come forth, I don't think he's come forth yet. And I do believe he is the literal seed of the devil, right? He is the final Nephilim. Right, is the Antichrist, right? Because when we go back to Genesis 3:15, God mentioned two seeds. He mentioned the seed of the woman, who most theologians, Christians agree that's the Messiah, that's Jesus. But he says, I'm going to put war between your seed and her seed. So the devil's going to have his own seed, who's the Antichrist. And the reason why I don't think he's come yet is because what we have to remember, and this is the big theme of the final Nephilim, I talk about how God, and this is how you can trust the Bible, right? God says in Isaiah 46, the way you can know that I'm the true God, above all the lower G gods, above the demons, above everybody, is prophecy. God said, I've declared the end from the beginning, from ancient times, the things that will come to pass. So God's telling us, he's told us all the events of the end times from the beginning of the Bible. And we get hints of that. So that's what I bring out in the final Nephilim, that everything in the Bible is a repetition. I call it the scroll of time. Events are cycling over and over again to their ultimate fulfillment in the end times. And Jesus said the end times were going to be like the days of Noah. He said, as it was in the days of Noah. You look in the days of Noah, what did you have? You had angelic beings openly interacting with humans. You had the supernatural on display openly. And that's the Antichrist. The Antichrist is going to be supernaturally empowered. He's going to perform miracles. So this is beyond just he's a charismatic guy who's smooth with his words. This is going to be someone who's going to perform miracles right before your face, before your eyes. He's going to suffer a mortal wound and come back from the dead. He's going to mimic the resurrection. So I think his power, his religion, his branding is going to be way beyond what we're seeing now. This is something that's coming from another realm, another dimension. That's going to really, because if you think about it, he has to bring all the religions of the world to look at him as the leader, as their savior, as their God, call it whatever you want, the ascended master. And that's only going to happen through literal supernatural manifestation. That will win people over in a heartbeat. You see someone literally call fire down from heaven or perform some supernatural miracle, they're going to start believing it.
And that one, it's just popped up here. We'll get back to Dan's question here one second here. One of the things that, it doesn't say when or how long the end time is. This has been always one of those things, for the longest time, the debate, because I've got a huge, I'm really passionate about science in the same way too, along with, as I was growing up, I think too many people are hung up on the literal the 1,000 years. So when they say like the earth is 6,000 years old, I'm like, just even the study of geology. I mean, it's like I can take you to a mountain side and I can show you the fact that there's pillow basalt, which is the stuff when lava comes out into the ocean. And this is in a mountain range that's, close to the elevation's almost 5,000 feet. I go, this geologically can't occur in 6,000 years. I mean, it literally cannot happen. I mean, it'd have to be a massive, just because you have so many layers of sediment that's buried on top of it. I go, this literally has to occur. This can't just be it thrust up into the sky, you know, through the flood, and that's why you see it up in the mountain range. It's like, that doesn't explain the layers of ocean life on top of it at the same time. And so, you know, for him, it's like, do you hold, like I said, you know, when it comes to, you know, kind of like that, or are you more in yourself more literal, like the time frame that says, like, you know, the 1,000 years? Like, there's a lot of people that do believe that
the Earth has to be 6,000 years old. No, I'm just joking.
Yeah, no.
No, it's definitely not. No, the Earth is way older, right? So first of all, I'm not what they call a young Earth creationist at all, because one, that's not in the Bible. The Bible never says the age of the Earth. It says the age of humanity, right? It gives you a timeline from Adam that you can count years off. But all we're told is God created the Earth in the beginning. And I believe that before Adam and Eve were even created, right, where there's a whole history, they call this the gap theory. Mm-hmm. There was a whole history of the angels on Earth, the original satanic rebellion on Earth that led to the Earth being flooded, right? We find the Earth in Genesis chapter 1. What is it? It's covered in water. It's covered in darkness. And it says this, the Spirit of God went over the deep, went over the waters, right? Exactly what we see after the flood. So it was a judged Earth, right? The Earth was judged in a pre-Adamic, pre-Adam, pre-Eve rebellion. So I believe the Earth is way, way older. And I certainly believe that science supports that. I believe the geological evidence, just looking at a star, right? If a star is 100,000 light years away, well, that light took 100,000 years to get here, right? If we're seeing it, that means that light was emitted 100,000 years ago. So how could that be if everything is 6,000 years old? So yeah, and additionally, like I said, when we get to Genesis chapter 3, when Satan shows up, he's already evil. When did that happen? What took place? We're told in Ezekiel 28, there's this whole description of Satan when he was a righteous angel. And it says that thou was in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was thy covering. It describes him wearing a breastplate with 9 jewels, just like the high priest Aaron wore in the book of Exodus. So he was a righteous angel in Eden before he turned. It says that you were perfect in all your ways until sin was found in you. So the Bible's telling you there's a history there, this angelic history that predates humanity that I believe took place, you know, millions of years ago. So I definitely think that that the Bible corroborates what science says. The Earth is way older than 6,000 years, like for sure.
Yeah. So and then to get back to his question before I get too far away from it, Dan was asked if Nimrod, do you believe that he was from the Nephilim line?
I see that. Yeah. So Nimrod is the one figure who's really, really tough for me. So I think that what could have happened to him is that somehow he may have been changed and, you know, supernaturally changed into a Nephilim. And I'll try to unpack it quickly. So one is in the Septuagint, the oldest extant version of the Old Testament, translated to Greek from ancient Paleo-Hebrew, it says, describing Nimrod, that he became a giant. That's the term it uses. So as if something happened to him. So what I point to, and then 3 times it calls him a giant in one verse. So in Greek, in the Greek version. So, and we see that he led the Tower of Babel rebellion, right? Trying to build this tower that was quote unquote reach into heaven. I believe that tower was trying to access the spiritual realm. And so much so that God said, if they finish this tower, nothing they imagine to do will be withheld from them. So I think that something may have happened, like maybe an occult ritual. The angels did something to him. And we see an example of that with King Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel 4, where he's literally changed by the Watcher angels into a half beast, half human hybrid. So I think something like that could have happened to Nimrod.
Sorry, one thing I was trying to figure something's going on with the chat. It just keeps
we're going in and out.
It just keeps going in and out. That's why I was trying to get the producer's attention to figure out what was going on here, because something just keeps.
The spirit is moving. The spirit is moving.
Is it Chase? Is it your mouse?
No.
Check your mouse. Yeah.
That's not my mouse.
All right. Yeah, I was like, Chris, is it on your end?
Someone said Morse code.
I know. It's like I all of a sudden just like trip it out. It's like going in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out.
Yeah, I don't know what happened with that.
Okay, so I think we got it. I think we got it figured out. All right. I'm just sorry. It was like it was like derailed. All of a sudden, I'm just like, why are we going in and out? All of a sudden, yeah,
It was very trippy.
yeah, yeah. So that was, but no, okay, that's cool because it's one of those. I was thinking when you were saying change, because I mean, let's be honest, it's one of those things. If you believe in, the Christianity thing, is like it would not be out of the realm of possibility that exposure to angelic thing could have, an effect on your DNA. I mean, it could. It's like anybody that's even now, when anybody has said that I've encountered something of the angelic or demonic, it actually affects people. But I don't know of anybody that's had a long-term exposure to it.
Right.
So you see Hollywood and things. What if it has that effect where if you actually embrace the angelic, that you actually could functionally change your DNA and all of a sudden, you grow.
Exactly. I think that's a great point. And as you said, I thought about the account when Moses goes up to Mount Sinai for 40 days just to speak to God, and God didn't even reveal himself. God was in a cloud. He said he's not going to show himself because if you look at me, you'll die. But just being that close to God, so when he came down from the mountain, his face was glowing. So he had to put a veil over his face because the Israelites were scared of him because his skin was emitting light from being in God's presence. So yeah.
Wow. So it's possible because that's and like you said, and then somebody Sharon, she question about Nebuchadnezzar.
There was a question about Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah, like you said, because I know he built that giant statue. Where
exactly. Yeah. So I'll get into Nebuchadnezzar. So Nebuchadnezzar is a big part of the final Nephilim. Again, I talk about this idea of repetition through time. And events being connected through time, which Craig, we didn't get into it, but
you're good.
I talk a lot about quantum physics in my new book.
Yes, I love that.
So there's some quantum entanglement going on here with Nebuchadnezzar and the Antichrist, right? Because he is a true foreshadowing type of the Antichrist. You mentioned the statue he built, right? He built a golden statue of himself to be worshipped as a god, and it was 60 cubits high, 6 cubits wide, and 6 instruments played, and you had that signal was time to worship him under penalty of death. Which is a true foreshadow of the Antichrist, right? He sets up an image of the beast. He demands worship under penalty of death, and his number, the number of the beast, is 666, 666, right? So you see that Nebuchadnezzar has this foreshadow. That's Daniel chapter 2, Sharon. He asked for scripture. That's Daniel chapter 2, the whole chapter. You'll find that, and you'll find all those details there. Then when you get to Daniel chapter 4, that's what I referenced earlier. This is when Nebuchadnezzar has a dream of a tree that gets cut down and basically to a stump. And the prophet Daniel tells him, the tree in the dream is you. Basically, you're this mighty king, you have this mighty kingdom, but if you don't repent and start treating your people well, stop oppressing people, seek justice, help the poor, God's going to humble you. And Nebuchadnezzar does not listen. And when he's punished, you have these watcher angels show up and they say, so they're basically making a supernatural pronouncement over him. They say, remove his heart and give him a beast heart and let him live as a beast for 7 years, right? So think about this. And it says he grows feathers, he has claws, and he eats on all fours and lives outside like an animal. So he literally becomes a beast-human hybrid. He was transformed by the watcher angels supernaturally into a hybrid beast for 7 years. Of course, you look at the Antichrist, he rules for 7 years. He's a man, but he's called the beast. Yeah, there's a depiction of Nebuchadnezzar there. So again, he notice the comparison there, that the Revelation calls him a man, calls him the beast. He has the number of a man, it's the number of the beast. So again, you see this dynamic repetition through scripture. So I mentioned that earlier because I was saying that what happened to Nebuchadnezzar could be what had happened to Nimrod. That again, being, as you said, Craig, being in the presence of angels, the watcher angels literally came down to Nebuchadnezzar and transformed him. So maybe something like that happened to Nimrod as well.
Yeah, and it's you start to see like some of the connections. Dan from, he also talks about the Vikings end times, Ragnarok prediction. You start to see some of the connections of world religions, how they have so much commonality, and that's one of the where I told you I've fallen kind of to the agnostic side through this kind of research, because I've noticed everything from like the creation story, the virgin birth. There's so many things, whether it's Vikings, whether it's Egyptians, whether Hindu, they all have this common theme. And I would say for me, it has given me, I've actually become more spiritual than actually religious, because I think myself, I have more of a belief in a higher power than I had really before, because too many things are interconnected.
They are interconnected because it's all the same story, right? This is the same history, right? There are probably 35 to 50 ancient flood accounts, right? Throughout the world. So that would lend one to believe that a flood took place, right? These are cultures that are not in communication with each other, right? So, but what I would say to promote the book, the Bible, is while you'll see these similarities, what religious text, and again, Ragnarok is another example, right? It's another retelling of the flood account, right? And so rebooting humanity. But which text is telling you the future with specificity, right? Just look at, there are numerous prophecies in the Bible that have already been proven, have already come to pass, right? That, by centuries ahead of time. Easiest one is predicting the reign of King Cyrus. God calls in the book of Isaiah Cyrus by name and says, I've chosen you to basically essentially free my people. And he was the king after the Babylonian captivity, which is a historical event. King Nebuchadnezzar was a real king in 586 BC. He really invaded Jerusalem, destroyed the temple, and took the Jews captive. Babylon was then conquered by the Medo-Persian Empire, and King Cyrus eventually allowed the Israelites to return back to their land. So this is centuries later. And it's by name. So, and that's just one example. Then you can look at the numerous prophecies about the Messiah that Jesus fulfilled. So there's, so I think, and the beauty of it is that's exactly what God says. God says the only thing that's going to show you who I am is I'm the only one who can tell you the future. I said it thousands of years ago. I'm going to tell you exactly what's going to happen because I'm the one, because God exists outside of time, right? Obviously, right? If you just understanding God, whether you believe the Bible or not, the proposition of the Bible is that God exists outside of time. And I believe God exists in all times at once, right? So again, going back to quantum physics. And so I think that's what distinguishes Christianity from every other religion. There are other things too that distinguish Christianity. Christianity is the only religion that tells you that you're horrible and you're a filthy, wretched sinner and you can't do anything about it. You're too bad. But in terms of telling the future, predictions that actually have come to pass, what text does that? What predictions or prophecies from other texts have come true?
I just, it's fascinating. I'm looking forward to the book myself. I'll fill in so many gaps. It's amazing. Yes, I can.
Study guide going to be a lot easier when you have the actual book. I mean,
I can tell you it's a fantastic study guide because it actually guided me into studying. So but that's not the way. That's not the way it's supposed to have worked. It's supposed to have gone the other way. So
he can share.
I also have documentaries. I'm going to send you guys the whole pack.
That's awesome. Because I was going to say, from what I was told, it's like in the books, there's QR codes, and I was disappointed when there was no QR codes. And then that's what got me down to the path that I'm like, something's off. And then that's when you said, it's like, that's a study guide. And I'm like, oh yes, that would make so much more sense.
Yeah, in the book there are in the actual book there are QR codes. I give video commentary on the book on different concepts, talk about different things. So I'm gonna send you guys. I'm gonna hook you all up. Don't worry, I'm taking care of you guys.
So once I can actually do some, there's some proper preparation here. I go. It's a generalized Nephilim questions. I go. We'll definitely have to have you back on, so that way we can cover, especially the new one, because once again, like I said, I want everybody to check, because you can go to Amazon and like I said, you can purchase these right away, and I'm going to put them up back on screen for everybody. His latest book that's just came out in November, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, the final Nephilim. We didn't really touch on that. I mean, we've got a couple minutes here. If you want tell everybody about, because we've been talking about the judgment, like, so the final Nephilim. So what was your start off point for wanting to write this companion to the book?
You're writing the final Nephilim itself, or the
they're writing the final Nephilim, because like you said, was it something like there was some unanswered questions that you needed to?
So I really Judgment of the Nephilim really deals with Genesis 6 and the account up through the Old Testament. It really goes to the birth of Christ, right? The mission was to get to the Messiah, the seed of the woman. And I wanted to separate that from where the final Nephilim is dealing with the book of Revelation. It's all about the final years, the Great Tribulation, the end of times, whatever you want to call it. And I wanted to separate it. One, the book was getting really long, but two, also I felt like it's in its own lane. And it's really, the first book is much more about Christ. The second book is about Antichrist, frankly. And I felt like there was such a need to show that you can understand Revelation from understanding the earliest events of the Bible. It's not about picking people today who are in the news and just throwing things out there. It's really that the Bible explains itself. And I wanted to really unpack the prophecies and show how the Nephilim still matter till the very end. And that even the idea of mixing genetics, I think, will come back again with the mark of the beast. The fallen angels are going to return. The abyss, where the angels are now chained, is opened and they're released. So it deals with all these different events and how it all unfolds, leading to Armageddon and the second coming of Christ.
Yeah, I won't lie. Growing through church, I was like an ADD squirrel. I mean, it was basically Genesis and Revelations were the two that I just stuck around to. Yeah. It's like when I got bored with what the preacher was talking, pastors up there talking about, all of a sudden I'm like, ooh, the four horsemen. Yes.
Yeah, there we go.
That was, between doodling on the program or that was kind of the two. So I guess, having unread it, so we're kind of, the best way, like for me to just sum it up, would be the Judgment of the Nephilim is Genesis and the final Nephilim is Revelations. It's just basically, it's like the Alpha and the Omega of the Nephilim story. So
exactly.
Yeah, no, but I'm absolutely looking forward to this. But the books for sure. Yeah. So that's one of those things that's going to be exciting. But so you, one of the things too, you have any upcoming appearances that you'd like to promote for people to?
I do actually. So I will be attending my first in-person conference in over 2 years. I will be at the Homeward Bound conference. It's sponsored by Prophecy Watchers in Colorado Springs, Colorado. It's coming up. I'll be there May 19th. It's May 19th to the 22nd. 25 speakers there. L.A. Marzulli, Gary Stearman, Derek Gilbert, Josh Peck, a lot of good speakers. I'll be doing 2 presentations there. For those who can't travel, I'll be doing the Unveiling Prophecy Conference, which is hosted by Skywatch TV, and that's an all virtual conference. That starts May 13th, I believe. I was actually just in the studio today recording my programs for that. So I'll be doing 2 presentations, but again, that's all virtual. And those are my 2 big events coming up right now. In November, I will be at the Alpha and Omega conference in Granbury, Texas. And then I'm doing my first Dallas, Texas conference in December at the Pre-Trib Rapture seminar conference in Dallas. So, but closest thing in May is Colorado Springs. So I'll be there in person.
Now, I didn't know anything about that Alpha and Omega one, so that's kind of weird that I use that as a reference, not to, just about a minute and a half ago that I used Alpha and Omega. Yeah, so that's like, wow, there's some synchronicity. That's crazy.
That's right. Yeah, I like the synchronicity. I'm all about that.
So, you've got. So we've got. Sorry, the producer was grabbing my attention there. No worries. Judgmentoftenephilim.com. Also, like I said, YouTube, go follow and subscribe there to him as well, and listen, because it's every Thursday that you have your show, correct?
Absolutely. Just go to my YouTube. Yep. You can find all my social media at judgmentoftenephilim.com. Again, my social media is Judgment of the Nephilim, so you just look it up on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram. You will find me. Feel free to send me questions. Maybe I'll pick one for Thursday Night Theology. I also do live questions on the show as well. So it's a great time. great fellowship, great group of people, and we have a lot of fun getting into the supernatural.
Yes, and like I said, and everybody get the book. Start with the book, then get the study guide. So like I said, I took one for the team and made the mistake. So yeah. So, but right, I really appreciate you coming on, man. This was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. So I hope you had a good time as well.
I had a great time. Love the show. Love the format, fellas. I appreciate it, and definitely let me know. I'm going to hook you guys up, send you the stuff this week. Whenever you want to have me back on, I'm happy to come on.
Awesome. Yeah. So just if you want to just hang out right once we get done with the outro, like I said, we'll just talk to you for a couple minutes here off the air. And like I said, we'll get you that information.
Oh, and shout out to the audience too. These were phenomenal questions. Like really,
thank you very much. Yeah, I appreciate. Yeah, everybody, thank you for your comments. That was great. So so check that out. Like I said, everybody will catch. If you just tuning in, you can also catch it on the archive when it goes down there. So we're going to have this for part 2 for sure. And so, but yeah, everybody. So we're like I said, I need everybody to, threebeardspodcast.com is our site. You go to check us out on all the social media sites, redbubble.com/threebeardspodcast, or you can get to it through threebeardspodcast.com. You can go to our merch site. Everybody that's bought merchandise from us, really appreciate it. It helps us out a lot. Shout out again to Laura Lehman Porter. She is our first Patreon, so that means a lot. So we appreciate everybody doing that. You can also support us by buying beard oil through Outer Realms Bathworks. Tanya Medea makes that for us. We get a percentage of that. So you can go to go there on Facebook, reach out to them, buy that, support us. But once again, just in ERRT Radio, I'm not going to forget them this time. Go check us out every Wednesday. They replay our show, 11 p.m. courtesy of Ron there. So thank you. Go check out ERRT Radio. Once again, patreon.com. Three Beards Podcast is how you support us. Everybody, we're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. So just go there, subscribe, and we really appreciate it. But once again, Ryan Pitterson, thank you so much. That was an amazing show. The study guide is amazing. I can't wait to see the regular book. So so everybody take care. We're gonna just a little teaser for next week. We are gonna harken back to our MMA roots, and we're bringing on Debbie Gamble. We're gonna be talking about her charity, Deb's MMA Closet, where she helps people that can't afford to train and get into the sport to actually get gear and help them out through there. So it's a charity that she's been doing there. So we're gonna talk with her. She's been a longtime fan of the show. So everybody, appreciate you watching. We are gonna see you next week. Good night.